Imagine for a moment that you are living in the Middle Ages. You have a piece of paper in your hand. Just a paper. But thanks to this paper, you can receive your gold from people you don't know at all, thousands of kilometers away. This is the version of what you do today with your bank cards from 800 years ago. And the ones who invented this were an organization said to be a religious order, but in reality, they were the world's first multinational bank. Their name was the Knights Templar. Their end came because a king did not want to pay his debt to them. I will tell you something that will make you look at everything differently when you hear it. In the 13th century, a French peasant could go to the Knights Templar headquarters in Paris and entrust all his gold. In return, they would give him a coded paper. This peasant could go to Jerusalem with that paper, show this coded paper to another Templar center there, and receive his money. The risk of being robbed by bandits on the road was zero, because what he carried on him was just a paper. And decoding that paper was only possible with a cipher system known only to the Knights Templar. Now take your phone in your hand. From your digital wallet, you send money to the account of the person you want. This system was invented 8 centuries ago by a group of warriors wearing white mantles with red crosses on their chests. But they were not just warriors. They were also the inventors of the most dangerous thing, the system that would bring their end. At the beginning of the 12th century, during the Crusades, pilgrims going to Jerusalem were constantly robbed by bandits. The roads were unsafe. The seas were full of pirates. The moment a pilgrim left Europe, he had to make a choice between his life and his money. At this point, 9 French knights came together. Their leader was a nobleman named Hugues de Payens. Their aim was initially to protect the pilgrims. Who could have known that this community, whose aim was to protect, would change the system? A pilgrim would come, entrust his money. He would receive a coded paper. He would make his payments with that document throughout his journey. On his return, he would collect the rest of his money. The best part of the system was that you never needed to carry your money on you. The money was in the safe of the Knights Templar. It was under their control. You trusted their power. And this trust birthed the greatest financial empire in history. The Knights Templar were recognized by the Church in the 12th century. The Pope gave them privileges. He exempted them from taxes. They had no obligation to account to kings. They were only answerable to the Pope. What did this mean? A power above states. An organization that answered to no one, made its own rules, and commanded its own army. And this organization started to get rich over time. And rapidly. Of course, there were loots obtained during the Crusades. But the real loot came from the banking system. Because money was not just gold or silver. Money was a promise. It was a commitment. And if you were strong enough to fulfill that commitment, then you could control money as you wished. In that era, this was a revolutionary idea. The Knights Templar collected deposits. They gave loans. They took interest. Yes, the church forbade interest, but the Templars covered this up with a very clever method. Instead of interest, they took donations. Or they called it administrative costs. The result was the same. Money brought money, and this system grew so much that it spread to every corner of Europe. They built 9,000 castles. Their headquarters in Paris were the safest safes of the era. Even kings hid their money there. The Pope himself trusted them. However, a problem arose right here. There is one thing a state or a king cannot accept: an authority stronger than itself. And the Knights Templar had become an authority almost stronger than even the king. By the end of the 13th century, they were no longer just an order. They were a massive economic power. And this was intolerable for states or kings. King Philip IV of France was one of these people. He was called Philip the Fair, but his character was not as beautiful as his appearance. When the king ascended the throne at the age of 17, he had a massive debt problem in front of him. His father had fought with the English. The treasury was exhausted. Philip constantly needed money to continue wars, maintain the palace, and consolidate his power. And a large part of this needed money came from the Knights Templar. King Philip IV of France was one of these people. He was called Philip the Fair, but his character was not as beautiful as his appearance. When the king ascended the throne at the age of 17, he had a massive debt problem in front of him. His father had fought with the English. The treasury was exhausted. Philip constantly needed money to continue wars, maintain the palace, and consolidate his power. And a large part of this needed money came from the Knights Templar. Philip owed a huge amount to the Templars. But the problem wasn't just debt. The main problem was that the Templars were now stronger than the king. In Paris, the headquarters of the Knights Templar looked more magnificent, safer, and richer than the king's palace. The people trusted the power of the Templars, not the king. This was an unacceptable situation for a king. Philip had a plan in mind, but he couldn't execute this plan alone. He had to agree with the Pope. Pope Clement V was politically a weak man. Philip had manipulated him. He even ensured he was removed from the Vatican and moved to Avignon. Now the Pope was under Philip's control, and this meant the end of the Templars. In 1307, a preparation began, a secret operation. Philip sent sealed letters to garrison commanders all over France. It was written on the letters to be opened on the specified day. When that day came, action was taken simultaneously all over France. Friday morning, October 13th, at dawn, all centers of the Knights Templar were raided. The knights were arrested. Everyone, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay, was chained. The accusations were crazy. It was said that the Templars denied Jesus, spat on the cross, worshipped the devil, engaged in homosexuality, and performed magic. Most of these were fabrications. It didn't really matter that they were fabrications, because the goal was not to prove the crime. The goal was to create fear, and Philip succeeded in this. Torture began. Heavy tortures. Some knights couldn't endure. They confessed even if it wasn't true. Some chose death. Even Grand Master de Molay couldn't endure for a while. Unable to bear the pain of torture, he confessed. But later, when the Pope's men came for questioning, he denied everything he said. But it was too late. The plan the king set up had started. The Templars were taken to court one by one. Their trials lasted 7 years. For 7 years, people all over Europe talked about this case. Some believed the Templars, some the king. But the result was clear. Because this was not a matter of law. This was a matter of power. In March 1314, on a small island on the banks of the Seine River in Paris, a stake was erected. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Order, and his friend Geoffroy de Charny were tied to this stake. Wood was piled up, the fire was lit, and the flames began to rise. At that moment, the old man began to scream with all his might despite the pain. He called out to Pope Clement V and King Philip, "I summon you to the presence of God. Within a year you will both die." And so it happened. Pope Clement died 1 month after the execution date. He was already sick for a long time, but the timing was striking. King Philip died in November of that year in a hunting accident. He suffered a brain hemorrhage during hunting. Some said paralysis, some said stroke. But the result was the same. Before a year was up, both were under the ground. Even more interestingly, Philip's 3 sons also died at a young age. None of them had a male heir. Within 14 years, the Capetian dynasty, which had lasted for 300 years, was destroyed. The throne of France changed hands. The French people saw this as a curse. The curse of the Templars. But let's look at a fact now. Was this a curse? Or was it something else? Because there is a detail not told here. The treasures of the Knights Templar. Philip destroyed the Templars. But could he seize that massive fortune? No. The treasures were lost. Still lost. Some historians say that the Templars learned of Philip's plan beforehand. They moved their treasures secretly, by ships, to Scotland, to Switzerland, to Portugal. Some even claim they went to America, and there they restructured. Is it a coincidence that Switzerland is the world's largest financial center today? Is it a coincidence that the Swiss flag is a white cross on a red background, the reverse of the Templar symbol of a red cross on a white background? No one knows for sure, but there are suspicions. Today, even 8 centuries later, the Knights Templar are remembered. In movies, novels, conspiracy theories. Why? Because they were not just an order. They represented a system. The money system, the power system, and this system still continues today. Now let's go a little deeper, because the real issue is not the Templars' treasures or curses. The real issue is what happens when financial power clashes with political power. History shows us that financial power wins, but not in the short term. In the long term, Philip destroyed the Templars. But could he save France? No. The treasury remained empty again, because he couldn't find the treasures. And he couldn't destroy the financial network created by the Templars, because that network was not bound to just one organization. That network was bound to an idea, and ideas live longer than people. What happened after the Templars? Other organizations emerged, some open, some secret. The Medici family developed banking in Italy, the Fugger family in Germany, the East India Company in the Netherlands, the Central Bank in England. Each one was a continuation of the system created by the Templars. Money became a power independent of states. And it is so even today. Now let's ask a question. Who rules the world today? States or banks? Central banks are independent institutions. Governments cannot give them orders. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank give loans on a global scale. Developing countries are in a debt swamp. Even developed countries are struggling with debts. Debts are constantly increasing. Interest is ticking. And this system is a much larger version of the system established by the Templars 8 centuries ago. The Knights Templar were stronger than the king. That's why they were destroyed. But today, banks are stronger than many states. So why aren't they destroyed? Because there is no longer a single organization. There is a system. And destroying a system is much harder than destroying an organization. Let's look from another angle. What did the Templars actually represent? Trust. People trusted them because they gave a promise and kept that promise. The same thing applies today. You deposit money in the bank. Why? Because you trust. But where does this trust come from? From the state guarantee. The state says, banks may fail, but I will protect your money. So where will the state find this money? By borrowing. From whom? From banks again. Do you see the cycle? The system feeds itself. And at the foundation of the system, there is a truth found by the Templars 8 centuries ago. Money is trust. And he who controls trust controls the world. Now let's come to the most disturbing question. Were the Templars really guilty or victims? Most historians say victims, because there is no concrete evidence for any of the accusations. Confessions were taken with torture. Trials were not fair. The king threatened the pope. And in the end, the order was destroyed, but the criminals were never punished. Because the real crime was being rich, being powerful, and the punishment for this crime was death. When we look at the world today, there are organizations stronger than hundreds of states. Technology companies, oil companies, arms companies, financial institutions. They avoid paying taxes to states. They don't break the laws of countries. They operate on a global scale, and no one can stop them, because the system is built around them. What does the story of the Templars teach us? It teaches us this: power changes its owner but never disappears. The Templars went, but their systems remained. Philip won but lost, because what he destroyed was an organization, but what he created was a legend, and legends live longer than facts. Today people are still looking for the Templars' treasure. Some are digging on Oak Island, some in castles in Scotland, some in secret tunnels in Portugal. But do you know where the real treasure is? In our pockets, in our bank accounts, in our credit cards. Because the Templars' greatest treasure was the system they invented. And that system is everywhere today. Now think for a moment. You have a plastic card in your hand. Just a card. But thanks to this card, you can shop anywhere in the world. Because that card gives a promise, commitment, and behind it stands a massive system. Just like the coded document in the hand of a pilgrim 800 years ago. What changed? Nothing. Only the players changed. The Templars went, banks came. Kings went, governments came. But the system is the same. Money is trust. Trust is power. And power never dies. The story of the Knights Templar is our story, because they laid the foundation of modern banking. Banking, loans, debts, interest, all of it. And even today, we live inside that system. Maybe unknowingly, maybe willingly. Did Philip win? In the short term, yes. He got rid of his debts. He seized the treasury. He looked strong. But what happened in the long term? His dynasty collapsed. His name was remembered as the cursed king. France experienced internal turmoil for centuries. The 100 Years' War began. And most importantly, the financial system was never again bound to a single authority. Scattered, spread, and it became impossible to control. Did the Templars lose? As an organization, yes. Knights were killed. Centers were raided. Their names were smeared. But as an idea, no. Because the system they created never died. Continued by evolving, transforming, growing. And today, that system is in every corner of the world. In conclusion, the Knights Templar were described to you as a religious order. Heroes of the Crusades. Guardians of the Holy Lands. But the truth is very different. They were the architects of modern finance. Pioneers of banking. They paid the price for not being able to control the power they created. But we, even today, live inside that power. Every time we take a loan. Every time we open a bank account. Every time we make a digital payment. The spirit of the Templars is with us. Their systems are with us. And perhaps their curses too. History is said to consist of repetition. The story of the Templars proves this. Power, money, betrayal, death. All is a cycle. And this cycle never ends. It just changes shape. Today there are no Templars. But there are others in their place. Bigger, stronger, more invisible. And perhaps one day their end will come too. But the system will continue. Because the system is stronger than people. And this is perhaps the most frightening truth.